Look around this room. Think about your workplace, your family dynamics, your social circles. Somewhere in your life, there is a person who operates like a behavioral parasite. You know exactly who they are. They thrive on your anxiety. They feed on your explanations, your defensive justifications, your anger, and your tears. They have spent years refining a highly specific psychological script designed to keep you off balance, defensive, and small. Every time you argue with them, you validate them. Every time you try to prove them wrong, you hand them the remote control to your emotional state. They aren't afraid of your anger. In fact, your anger tells them exactly where your boundaries are weak. They aren't afraid of your logical arguments. They will simply twist your words into a weapon to use against you in the next sentence. But what if I told you there is a hidden back door in the human operating system? What if I told you that the most dangerous predators in your social ecosystem are actually hyper-fragile organisms operating on a deeply flawed psychological code? In the next few minutes, we are going to look at the exact mechanics of behavioral dominance. Not through aggression, not through clever comebacks or shouting matches. We are going to look at 7 precise, silent physical shifts, micro-behaviors rooted in human interrogation tactics and behavioral profiling that instantly flip the power dynamic. When you deploy these 7 behaviors, something fascinating happens in the brain of a toxic person. Their heart rate spikes, their adrenaline surges. For the first time in their life, their psychological radar goes completely dark. They realize with terrifying clarity that they are no longer the predator. They are the specimen. If you miss even one of these behavioral shifts, you leave an open window for them to regain control. But if you execute all 7, you don't just protect yourself, you become the one person they will actively avoid cross-examining ever again. Let's look at the data. Most people believe that to defeat a bully, a narcissist, or a manipulator, you have to match their volume. You have to scream louder, argue smarter, or outmaneuver them in a war of words. That is a fundamental misunderstanding of human behavioral psychology. Manipulation requires friction to generate heat. If you give them friction, you give them fuel. Tonight, we take away the friction. We are going to look at the 7 silent behaviors that will make a toxic person instantly, deeply afraid of your presence. When a toxic person hurls an insult, a passive-aggressive swipe, or a blatant lie at you, the standard human script dictates an immediate reaction. You either defend yourself or you attack back. Instead, I want you to employ a tactical pause. When they finish speaking, do absolutely nothing for 3 full seconds. Do not blink, do not shift your weight. Just look at them. To the human brain, an unanswered statement creates intense cognitive dissonance. In those 3 seconds of dead silence, they will internally panic, wondering if they just overstepped a boundary they cannot recover from. In standard social interactions, humans blink roughly 15 to 20 times per minute. When we are stressed or defensive, that rate spikes. Toxic people look for this. It is a subconscious green light that tells them their words are landing. When they are speaking to you, consciously drop your blink rate to near 0. Keep your eyes locked perfectly on the bridge of their nose. By refusing to blink, you signal a complete absence of fear. In behavioral profiling, an unblinking, calm gaze is the primary indicator of a predator focusing on a target. It signals absolute situational control. Watch people when they are uncomfortable. They adjust their watch. They shift their weight from foot to foot. They touch their neck or they clear their throat. These are called pacifying behaviors, subconscious movements designed to soothe the nervous system. Toxic people are masters at reading these tells. The next time someone attempts to gaslight or diminish you, freeze your frame. Drop your shoulders, place your hands at your sides or flat on the table, and eliminate all micro movements. Total physical stillness in the face of aggression signals that their behavioral attack has generated zero stress in your nervous system. When a manipulator pushes your buttons, your vocal cords naturally tighten, raising the pitch of your voice and accelerating your speech rate. You sound desperate to be heard. If you must respond, do so by dropping your voice by an octave and slowing your cadence down by half. Speak at the pace of a judge delivering a verdict, not a defendant pleading a case. Low, slow, controlled speech indicates a low heart rate. If your heart rate is low, you cannot be controlled. Toxic people love emotional adjectives. They love saying things like, "You always ruin everything," or "Everyone thinks you're being ridiculous." Instead of arguing the premise, strip away the emotion and ask for raw data. Look at them calmly and say, "Give me a specific example." When they try to pivot back to emotional language, state it again, even quieter. "I need the date and the specific example." By forcing them to operate in the realm of objective data, you expose the absolute emptiness of their narrative. A manipulator relies on keeping their true motives hidden in the subtext. They want to insult you while pretending to compliment you. The moment you perceive the manipulation, drag it into the light using a flat, emotionless observation. If they give you a backhanded compliment, simply ask, "What was your specific objective in saying that just now?" Do not ask it with anger. Ask it with the mild curiosity of a scientist looking at a cell under a microscope. By forcing them to explain the mechanics of their own manipulation, you destroy the camouflage they rely on to survive. The ultimate play for a toxic person is to control when the conversation ends. They want to drop a conversational bomb and walk away, leaving you stewing in your own cortisol. Flip the script. Mid-sentence, while they are in the middle of their tirade, look at your watch, nod once as if remembering an appointment, and simply walk away without saying a word. Do not storm off angrily. Just remove your presence as if they suddenly became invisible. You are communicating the ultimate psychological truth. You do not possess the baseline status required to occupy my time. Toxic people are not strong. They are fragile structures held up by the emotional reactions of the people around them. They are parasites looking for a host to feed their deep-seated insecurities. The moment you implement these 7 silent behaviors, you stop providing the theater they need to perform. You become a psychological mirror, forcing them to look at their own inadequacy. And that is the one thing they fear above all else. Turn off the noise. Lean into the silence. Take back your frame. The human brain is fundamentally a pattern recognition engine operating on highly predictable social scripts that have been hardwired into our biology over millennia. When a toxic individual, a narcissist, or a calculated manipulator launches a verbal assault against you, whether that takes the form of a sharp insult, a passive-aggressive jab, or a blatant architectural lie designed to distort your reality, they are not just speaking, they are launching a psychological probe. They have pre-programmed expectations for how that interaction must unfold. The standard human script, dictated by our evolutionary drive to defend our status within the tribe, requires an immediate counter-response. Under normal circumstances, you will either instinctively erect an emotional defense, offering justifications and explanations to protect your ego, or you will launch a retaliatory strike, matching their aggression with your own anger. Both of these responses are exactly what the manipulator wants. They represent biological compliance. They tell the predator that their weapon hit the target, disrupted your nervous system, and successfully forced you to play on their psychological turf. To completely shatter this dynamic, you must deploy the 3-second temporal anchor. This behavioral tactic relies on the deliberate execution of absolute vacuum. The moment the toxic person finishes speaking their venomous line, You do not respond. You do not flinch. You do not shift your posture. You do not let out a defensive sigh, and you do not blink. You simply lock your gaze onto the bridge of their nose and freeze time for 3 consecutive seconds. Count them silently in your mind. 1001, 1002, 1003. To the untrained eye, 3 seconds sounds like a brief moment, but in the high-stakes arena of interpersonal dominance, 3 seconds of dead silence is an absolute eternity. By inserting this profound psychological void into the conversation, you are actively refusing to provide the friction the manipulator requires to sustain their momentum. In the absence of your emotional reaction, the toxic person's brain hits a catastrophic error code. The script they spent hours preparing or years refining has completely broken down. Because human beings experience intense cognitive dissonance when their perceived reality does not align with their immediate environment, those 3 seconds of dead silence force the manipulator to sit alone in the toxicity they just generated. Without your defensive energy to push against, the weight of their own words collapses right back onto them. During this deliberate pause, a profound shift occurs in their internal state. Their confidence transforms into acute vulnerability. They will instantly begin to second-guess themselves, entering a state of internal panic as their subconscious mind asks a series of frantic questions. Did they hear me? Did I just cross a line I can't walk back? Do they know something I don't know? Are they calculating a counterstrike that will ruin me? By anchoring them in this temporal void, you strip away their leverage without uttering a single word. You signal to their nervous system that your internal state is completely unbothered, unhackable, and governed entirely by your own terms, forcing them to realize that they have lost absolute control over the emotional trajectory of the room. The visual system is the primary conduit through which human beings broadcast their internal emotional states, and it serves as the foundational metric for establishing social hierarchy. In standard baseline human interactions, the average individual blinks between 15 and 20 times per minute. This rate is highly fluid, governed entirely by the autonomic nervous system. The moment a person experiences stress, anxiety, or a sudden threat to their social status, their heart rate elevates, causing their blink rate to skyrocket. Toxic individuals, narcissists, and psychological predators are hyper-attuned to these micro-expressions. They rely on these subconscious physical tells to measure the efficacy of their manipulation. When they attack you, they are looking directly into your eyes to see if your pupils dilate, if your gaze darts away, or if your eyelids begin to flutter rapidly. A high blink rate is a biological white flag. It is a clear signal that their words have successfully penetrated your psychological armor, triggered a stress response, and forced your nervous system into a state of submission. To completely dismantle this predatory assessment, you must consciously deploy the unblinking visual frame. The very millisecond a toxic person initiates a verbal assault or an emotional manipulation tactic, you must seize manual control of your own biology. You must deliberately suppress your natural urge to blink, dropping your blink rate down to near zero. Do not glare at them with theatrical anger, as anger is merely another form of emotional validation that tells them they have power over you. Instead, adopt a completely flat, neutral expression and lock your pupils perfectly onto the bridge of their nose, just between their eyebrows. By focusing on this specific anatomical point, rather than staring directly into their pupils, you prevent yourself from becoming hypnotized by their chaotic emotional energy, allowing you to maintain an unshakable, detached focus. In the field of advanced behavioral profiling and tactical interrogation, Maintaining an unblinking, tranquil gaze is recognized as the ultimate indicator of an apex predator focusing intensely on a target. When you look at a manipulator this way, you flip their evolutionary wiring against them. The human brain is hardwired to interpret a complete lack of blinking during a high-stakes interaction as a severe, looming threat state. In nature, a creature that does not blink while being confronted is a creature that is completely unafraid, utterly confident, and actively calculating its next tactical move. As the toxic person continues to speak, they will watch your eyes for the expected signs of submission, but they will find absolutely nothing. This lack of visual feedback sends a shocking wave of adrenaline through their own nervous system. They will realize with absolute certainty that their words are failing to register as a threat to you. By denying them the satisfaction of a fluttering, submissive gaze, you strip them of their psychological orientation. They will begin to feel an overwhelming sense of exposure, as if their hidden motives are being systematically dissected under a microscope. This simple, silent shift in your visual behavior instantly redefines the power dynamic in the room, transforming you from an emotional target into an unmovable, terrifyingly calm authority figure that they will desperately want to escape from. Every single day, your body is engaged in a continuous, silent broadcast, transmitting thousands of microsignals that reveal your exact level of confidence, anxiety, and comfort to everyone around you. When the human nervous system detects a threat, whether that threat is a physical predator or a toxic individual weaponizing words to diminish your status, it immediately enters a state of high alert. To cope with this sudden surge of internal stress, the brain unconsciously activates pacifying behaviors. These are the subtle, seemingly insignificant micro-movements that people perform without even realizing it. Shifting weight from one foot to the other, adjusting a watch strap, touching the throat, smoothing down clothing, clearing the throat, or nervously tapping a pen. To a calculated manipulator, these tiny physiological adjustments are the ultimate prize. They are the definitive physical confirmation that their psychological venom has pierced your skin, disrupted your equilibrium, and triggered an internal panic that you are desperately trying to soothe. To completely paralyze a toxic person's ability to manipulate you, you must establish total kinesic stillness. The moment they attempt to gaslight you, insult your character, or execute a power play, you must instantly freeze your physical frame. You must consciously override the autonomic nervous system's desire to pacify itself. If you are standing, plant your feet firmly into the ground, drop your shoulders completely, and let your arms hang loosely but entirely motionless at your sides. If you are sitting, place your hands flat on the desk or your thighs, lock your spine into a relaxed but perfectly erect posture, and eliminate every single twitch, shrug, and nod. You must become as still as a stone monument, allowing absolutely no kinetic feedback to escape from your body. In the high-stakes world of behavioral profiling, total physical stillness in the presence of an active threat is the single highest indicator of absolute psychological dominance. When you eliminate all micro-movements, you are actively communicating a devastating message to the manipulator's subconscious mind. Your words have caused zero chemical change in my body. Because the toxic individual relies entirely on reading your physical feedback loop to calibrate their next move, your absolute stillness leaves them completely blind. They are accustomed to watching people squirm, defend themselves, or show visible signs of agitation under their pressure. When they look at you and see a perfectly calm, unmoving physical frame, their primitive survival brain immediately sounds an alarm. In nature, absolute stillness in the face of aggression does not signal submission. It signals an apex status that feels absolutely no need to run, hide, or fight. It indicates that you occupy a position of such profound security that their entire hostile performance is nothing more than insignificant background noise to you. As the silence stretches and your frame remains utterly motionless, the toxic person will feel an icy wave of exposure wash over them. The lack of physical reaction forces them to experience the profound awkwardness of their own bad behavior, destabilizing their confidence, spiking their heart rate, and making them deeply afraid of the unshakable authority you possess. The human voice is a direct, unfiltered reflection of the state of the autonomic nervous system, serving as an acoustic barometer that reveals exactly who holds the psychological upper hand in any given room. The moment a calculated manipulator, a narcissist, or a hostile individual pulls the trigger on an emotional attack, they are deliberately trying to hijack your biology. When a person feels threatened, defensive, or desperate to validate their own position, their body undergoes a rapid physiological shift. The vocal cords naturally constrict, the breath grows shallow, and the heart rate climbs. This chemical surge forces the pitch of the voice to rise and causes the cadence of speech to dramatically accelerate. You begin speaking faster and higher, subconsciously trying to outrun their interruptions or forcefully inject your perspective before they can shut you down. To the toxic person, this vocal shift is music to their ears. It is an acoustic signature that proves you have lost your center. It tells them that they have successfully induced a state of panic, forcing you into the submissive role of a defendant desperately pleading their case before a hostile judge. To completely turn the tables on this predatory dynamic, you must master the vocal drop. The very instant the toxic person finishes their tirade and waits for your frantic defense, you must deliberately do the exact opposite of what every human instinct commands you to do. Before you utter a single word, allow a brief pause to settle. Then deliberately lower the pitch of your voice by a full octave. Simultaneously, decelerate your speech rate by half, speaking with a measured, rhythmic cadence that refuses to be rushed by the tension in the room. You must speak at the absolute pace of a supreme authority, delivering an unappealable verdict, rather than a frantic suspect trying to clear their name. By forces of pure physics, speaking slowly and deeply requires you to take control of your diaphragm, which mechanically forces your heart rate to drop and stabilizes your entire nervous system. When you deploy this low, heavy, and slow vocal register, the effect on a toxic person is psychologically devastating. Human beings are evolutionarily wired to associate deep, slow acoustics with maximum safety, absolute dominance, and zero fear. A low voice tells the listener that the speaker's body is completely flooded with calm, composed chemistry, signaling that they are totally unthreatened by the external environment. As you deliver your words with chilling, deliberate precision, the manipulator's primitive brain immediately registers a massive status inversion. They realize that while they are burning massive amounts of nervous energy trying to provoke you, you are operating with the cold, detached efficiency of a machine. Your slowed cadence forces them to hang on your every word, completely resetting the tempo of the interaction to match your timeline, not theirs. This vocal drop effectively starves them of the emotional high they were seeking. It projects a terrifying level of self-contained power that communicates a definitive truth to their subconscious. You are far too small to disrupt my peace. Faced with this unshakable acoustic wall, the toxic person's confidence will completely evaporate, leaving them disoriented, outmatched, and profoundly intimidated by the silent strength behind your tone. The foundational architecture of manipulation relies almost entirely on the exploitation of subjective reality, emotional ambiguity, and grand, sweeping generalizations. Toxic individuals, narcissists, and psychological bullies do not operate in the realm of objective truth. Instead, they thrive in the foggy, emotionally charged landscape of hyperbole. They weaponize absolute statements, routinely utilizing phrases such as, "You always ruin every single project we work on," or "Absolutely everyone in this office thinks your ideas are completely ridiculous." These verbal attacks are deliberately constructed as traps to hook your ego. The standard human response to a sweeping accusation is to dive headfirst into the emotional mud, attempting to argue against the unfair premise, pleading for fairness, or aggressively listing your past achievements to prove them wrong. The moment you engage with their emotional adjectives, you have already lost the war. You have accepted their distorted frame of reality, allowing them to dictate the terms of the engagement, while you waste valuable psychological energy defending yourself against a phantom narrative. To entirely paralyze this manipulative strategy and strike absolute fear into the heart of a toxic person, you must deploy the neutral data query. Instead of reacting with anger, indignation, or defensiveness, you must completely strip the emotional fabric away from their statement and force them to operate strictly in the cold, unforgiving realm of raw data. When they finish launching an emotionally charged, generalized attack, you must look at them with absolute calmness, adopt a completely flat, expressionless voice, and say, "Give me a specific example." This is not a request. It is a clinical demand for verifiable evidence. Because their original attack was built entirely on a foundation of emotional fiction designed to provoke a reaction, they will almost never have actual data to back up their claim. The sudden demand for an objective metric will cause their conversational engine to instantly seize up. When confronted with this sudden lack of emotional compliance, the manipulator will typically attempt a tactical pivot. They will try to dodge the demand by launching a second, even broader generalization, saying something like, "You know exactly what I'm talking about. You do it all the time." You must not take the bait. You must remain an immovable psychological wall. You simply repeat the query, dropping your voice even lower, making it even quieter and more deliberate. "I need the exact date, the time, and the specific example." By relentlessly restricting the boundaries of the conversation to objective, historical data, you effectively starve the toxic person of the emotional oxygen they need to survive. You force them to stand under a glaring spotlight where the absolute emptiness and dishonesty of their narrative is exposed to everyone in the room. To the primitive brain of a manipulator, being forced to provide empirical proof for a lie is an existential threat. They realize with sudden and terrifying clarity that they are no longer dealing with an emotional target they can easily unbalance. They are dealing with a human forensic auditor who is systematically dismantling their illusions. This neutral data query instantly flips the status dynamic.